Hi, I'm Brian Lloyd. I'm the CEO and founder of Painted Porch and founded the company just over 7 years ago with the mission of bringing intellectual rigor and financial analysis to help people self-actualize, to answer problems that matter and impact their daily lives with our nerdy finance brains.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Newell, and I'm an advisor with Painted Porch, and I am based in the Santa Barbara area.
Hi, I'm Brooke Jackson. I'm an advisor here with Painted Porch, and I'm in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zachary Phillip. I'm an associate advisor here at Painted Porch, and I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Well, thanks everyone so much for joining our roundtable today. I really wanted to jump into the discussion of rent versus buy, mostly because for myself, I was actually living in Austin, Texas, and I went through that balance and ended up buying and doing a remodel. And then I've moved out here to California, and I'm just going through this decision for myself personally. And so it was just of interest. But then also, I just feel like over the last couple of years, there's just been so many conversations going on with our clients, thinking through with interest rates and costs of buying and everything like that. Just what should I be doing? What have been the possible things that you could do with buying in the past? Is it as worth it? And so I'd love to kind of chat with everybody about this today.
I've always found this really interesting too, because I think now clients are usually surprised by maybe what the numbers say, because historically it's looked pretty good to buy and own a home and benefit from that appreciation over time. But yeah, now it's more interesting environment. There's a lot of factors that go into the decision.
I also think that a lot of clients, or everybody has this idea that if you're renting, you're just throwing money away. And I don't see it that way. I think renting is flexibility, and then buying, there's a lot of liability and hidden costs. And at least for certain areas or certain times, the savings, it's kind of a wash. So it can be tricky. And it all depends on your individual situation and where you're headed.
Yeah, and I really like the group that we have here today, because I think with Texas and California, there's a lot of differences. And so for me, I'd actually love to hear from you guys, Brooke and Zach. What is your thought with Texas? Is it an easier decision on whether to rent versus buy? What is your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I would say property taxes, cost of that is higher in Texas. I think people are often comparing, to Zach's point, of cost of rent, like your rent expense versus your mortgage costs. And you got to really think about everything, like insurance, property taxes, all the maintenance that goes into it that you don't think about can definitely add up over time. And then in Houston, we have to think about hurricanes. So you gotta have flood insurance. It's a big one.
And one thing that surprised me for Texas was the hail. So I knew it hailed in Texas. I didn't know how frequent it was. So keeping that in mind. And then this is my second home purchase. And this time I bought up significantly to almost triple the square footage. So it was a lot more maintenance. It was not an old, but not as new as before home. And I think what surprised a lot of people is the first year or two, that's where you find everything that's gone wrong or can go wrong in the house. And it can be significant. Yeah. So just specifically for me, I put about 12% of the purchase price into my home within the first 2 years that I bought it. And that's a big cost.
What do you guys think is a good estimate for clients when they think about realistic maintenance expenses over time? So as you said, Zach, I know it's definitely probably heavier in the beginning, but for the plans that we put together, what do you think is a good general estimate?
So I think part of that depends on if you're a current homeowner or not. So a lot of current homeowners, they have a little bit of the maintenance cost in their expenses already. But if you're switching from renting to buying and being a homeowner, a lot of people don't realize that's such an incremental increase in just your day to day. A good rule of thumb is if you're going to switch from rent to buy, like 2% of the value of the home is a good starting place for maintenance and insurance and things like that. But then you also have to think about taxes, and that's region dependent, and HOA, and that's neighborhood dependent. So all that together it can really add up quickly. Those are the hidden costs annually.
And a lot of people, throw in a renovation every once in a while too. We didn't talk about that yet, but it's another additional cost, which is hard to predict, but can think about it when you're purchasing a home. It's older.
Yeah, we've seen that. That's brought up something, Brooke, that I see a lot, which is this interplay between renting and buying, which is not just a buy versus rent analysis on a apples to apples basis, but a lot of times they're not looking at renting the same thing they're going to buy. So if they're renting and they're thinking about buying, a lot of times the buying decision is a nicer property that they want or something they're going to put a lot more money into. And so it makes it that rent versus buy analysis much more complicated because, and I think sometimes, I don't know how many of you have been through it, but sometimes we encourage clients to go, if they're thinking about that, to go look at it and say, well, what would it cost to rent what you really want? You know, if you're in a 2-bedroom apartment and you're thinking about buying because you want to move to a 4-bedroom house, what does a really nice 4-bedroom house cost to rent, so that you're looking at the trade-off and can really understand, is it really the upgrade that you're looking for, or is it owning the property long term?
Yeah, Brian, I love that point. I think in California, I mean, specifically in Santa Barbara area, that's a huge piece, because I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to be able to rent, a bigger home that is nicer and maybe even a better spot. And the cost of actually buying that home and just the maintenance and insurance, just like what you guys were talking about earlier. Unfortunately for California, we have pretty much every issue, even hurricanes now we've gotten at this point. So just with insurance, with fires and earthquakes and everything like that, for a lot of the clients we speak to, it's about, well, you may actually be able to rent a home that's a lot more into what you're wanting versus on the buying side, and the amount that you have to have saved up in cash for that purchase.
And I'll just add, when we do run the numbers recently, it seems like more often than not, just purely financial, that renting often does look better, has a better financial outcome. Of course, that has a lot of assumptions built in along the way, where you can't predict exactly how, the growth of real estate over time and what your costs will be and things like that. But it always brings up a very interesting conversation, because then we talk about, okay, why are you really making this decision, and why is it important to you? Do you feel like, it's purely financial, or is owning a home one of your goals in life? And how can we make that happen?
Yeah, I love that, because there are so many reasons that are not purely financial. I mean, there's, money is to live your life, not just to add up to more money. And so the decision usually isn't just the financial math. And I think it is really counterintuitive for people. This is the biggest inversion of that rent versus buy analysis I've ever seen. And I think I started looking at those when I was in my late 20s, so not that maybe that's only been 5 years. I don't know. We don't have to give away my age, but it's been a long time. And most of us, our entire lifetime has been declining interest rates, and that pushing home values up, in addition to low inflation. And a lot of those things may not be flipping, but they certainly are not as certain as they seem to be the last, 20, 30 years. So it is an interesting time. But back to what Brooke said, if you want to own a home, the question is not, is it better than renting? It's, how do I make it happen, and does my plan support it? If you're truly just looking at it indifferent, then there's a really clear rent versus buy analysis. And one of the big assumptions, again, Brooke hit on as well, is what is inflation and what is the appreciation of the home we're assuming. And the market seems to be assuming a lot of inflation and a lot of appreciation in the current rent versus buy analysis. If you look at, like, why would people buy at these prices, they have to be assuming pretty high appreciation rates of the property to make it make sense versus renting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the market has been pretty strong as well. So when you're thinking of a potential of 5-6%, that you could get every year with your home versus, some years we've had recently where you're plus 10%, plus 15% in the market, there's a balance there for sure. And I think one of the things that is important to understand is that renting also can be a big benefit. It buys you flexibility, and you can make changes, and buying really buys you that stability. And so for some people, it really just depends on what you value. So that's what we talk to our clients about. What is the most in your life right now? What will add potentially additional stress or take off that stress? Because a home can be a liability as times come up. If you don't have, the money to pay for that exploded outdoor water heater. That would happen to me in Texas when we had the freeze happen. And that wasn't something that I was thinking was going to happen where I was living. And so those little things could have anxiety for people too. And so having that flexibility and lack of stress can be beneficial too.
And I love that because there's things about renting that I honestly miss. And I've flip-flopped from renting a lot to buying to renting to now buying. And now I'm kind of looking at renting again because just that hard to value, like not stressing over the maintenance. When something breaks in my house, I have to find the contractor and I have to get the bids, or I have to do it. And something leaks in the ceiling at 2 a.m. Not that specifically happened to me. I have to figure out what's going on. I don't just call somebody. And I do miss that. That's an aspect of renting that I really enjoyed, was not being liable for all of the maintenance.
Yeah, and I don't know how people value that in a rent versus buy analysis when it's their primary residence, but I know when we look at rental properties, it's one of the biggest things we put into the analysis is, even if you don't have a property manager, assume you're paying for one because you're doing the job. And so if you want to look at the economics on a real standalone basis, you have to put in a number for what Zach just talked about. Like, what is that actual emotional weight, but even the time spent solving those problems and fixing things and working with contractors. A lot of times that doesn't even show up in the spreadsheets we use to compare rent versus buy, but it's certainly a huge factor.
I agree. I'm in a similar boat to Zach. I've been in our home for a little over 2 years, and we rented long term before that. And we always say like, kind of missed that. But we had a great landlord. We rented a home, so we didn't have to worry about, apartment neighbors. So had some of the benefits of having a home, but didn't have to deal with all the stress that comes along with it. So lots of things to think about. I think timeline is important too. So if you think you may be moving, in the near future, purchasing a new home is probably not the best idea, because you really don't know what the market will do in that short amount of time.
What's the commission on a sale? I know it's probably still 5% in California. So there's also the friction, right? Like you buy a place, you sell it in a year, you got to make up the 5% just to get back to even. And all the other costs, and then furnishing and decorating and getting settled in. And there's just so many. Yeah, my rule of thumb's always been at least 5 years, that you think you're going to be there at least 5 years. Life happens, but you need enough time to make it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's also, some people, I feel like, and when I first was making the decision, it was, well, okay, I'm going to pay the down payment and then I'm going to have my mortgage. And then, there'll be a couple of things, but the mortgage payment really is the floor. It's not the ceiling of what you're paying every month. And so you have those property taxes, which are higher in Texas than they are in California, but still not great. And then you have, the insurance and the maintenance and sometimes HOA dues. A lot of clients we've seen recently, like those keep going out of control, especially in Santa Barbara. And then utilities and landscaping. I know in Texas, I remember that, just because we had so many droughts when I was there, those costs just went up really high. So I feel like it's also important when you dive into that discussion and think about it, you walk through all these additional costs and really see how much it will be per month. And because I feel like sometimes people miss out on that when they're putting in their calculations for their monthly spend. Because with rent, it's really easy. That's, exactly how much you're going to be paying each month.
I think a lot of people we work with come in with the idea that real estate has almost a surreal ability to compound wealth for people, and they all have stories they walk around with like, I know my uncle, or I know this friend, and they bought real estate, and that's how they accumulated all their wealth. And there's two things in there that are, we don't walk around trying to disavow people of their stories, but at the same time, we do have the data, and long-term data on real estate in the vast majority of places is that real estate's gone up by inflation. In some places a little more. Maybe if we have 2.5% inflation, they've gone up 3 or 4%. But real estate has not gone up 10, 12, 15% anywhere. And the vast majority of the return that people talk about is from borrowing money to buy real estate. It's the concept of leverage that really works out. And especially when you maybe 40 years ago could borrow at 15%, and then that went down to 2.5% at the bottom. That provided a lot of the value created and not just the appreciation of the home itself. And we hear that a bunch of different ways. I know in Santa Barbara, we hear all the time, you go anywhere, throw a rock, have a conversation. Someone's like, oh, they bought that house for $20,000. You're like, okay, and it's $2 million now. And it's like, well, okay, when they buy it, they bought it 40 years ago. Okay, well, that's 4% appreciation. It's just crazy, but it's like, it just isn't. And then the stock market's done 8% a year or 9% a year in the same period. But from the Depression, we have the rule that you never borrow against a liquid investment portfolio. If you borrowed 80, 90% of the value against an investment portfolio, you would have made triple what you made on real estate. And please don't do that. But that's just to be an apples to apples comparison. Some of these things, if you're thinking about it, I really would encourage you to break out the pieces and say, what are my assumptions on each piece of this? And then going back again to, you don't need to do any of that if what you really want to do is buy a house and just figure out how you pay for it. But if you're trying to make it a financial decision, you really want to back out, what are your assumptions for appreciation? What's your assumption for leverage, the cost of that leverage, all those different things. The stories are helpful in some ways, but they can also get you emotionally trapped in a decision instead of grounded in the numbers. Zach, did you do any, did you get nerdy with spreadsheets about your rent versus buy?
Not for the decision, but I've been comparing my costs like year over year to renting. And for what I could rent my personal residence for, it's about a wash, the home ownership. It's actually right on. And it's part of that's my interest rate. I got about 4% just for the timing of the buy and everything. But it's very strange that I could rent my own house and it'd be the same.
Yeah, today in California, I don't know where it is right now, but it was almost double the cost to buy versus rent on a monthly basis. Plus, of course, you're tying up the down payment capital. So it was it's been pretty topsy-turvy versus history. There's times when you could actually buy a house and be paying less the day after you bought the house on a monthly basis, and it's not even close here. Even in a lot of places in California, even buying and then, we have people that buy investment property and Airbnb it barely pays off. And that used to be, because you take the risk on the Airbnb, it used to be a much higher return. It's a really interesting real estate environment. One of the biggest reasons from a purely financial perspective to own a home, in my mind, is that it is an inflation hedge on one of the biggest expenses you have. Whether we know it or not, it's possible that there's really high inflation in the future. And we talked about property taxes will go up, insurance will go up, but that core asset, the actual living cost in the house will not go up. If you're in a rental, presumably that landlord, if they're paying attention, is going to raise that rent throughout your lifetime with inflation. So when you get really high inflation, owning real estate is a really wonderful hedge. And if it's the real estate you live in, that means you're directly benefiting from that inflation hedge. It's not like, okay, we went and bought an apartment building and those rents are going up, so we're making money, but now we're paying on the other side because we have to pay for the place we live. Owning your own property is insulation against that risk.
Yeah, I also think the positive side of buying a home as well when it comes to the purely financial side is also diversification. If you are investing, a lot of your wealth is in the market, well, we can have situations like, COVID or the financial crisis, I guess, was unique because that also hit house prices as well. But with your home, it is an asset that you have and it diversifies your wealth, which is always something that's a good thing to have. So you can buy REITs, and be invested there, but it's still connected to markets. And like Brian noted, you get to benefit yourself and it's somewhere that you love. And I feel like there's a lot of emotional aspects to it where you can remodel it exactly the way you want and you can give it to family. It can be a great option to gift in the future for your estate. I think there's good benefits for there as well.
I've heard a lot of people love the idea of buying their forever home and as they approach retirement, not having that mortgage anymore. So paying off their liability before they get into retirement, because it just, psychologically feels better when you don't have that income from your job to not have that mortgage or rent payment. And you feel like you have this other asset that you can leverage if you need to, and you don't have an additional expense of mortgage or rent. So that feels really great to a lot of people.
So I think part of that is acknowledging the emotional side of it. Again, that's hard to quantify. You can show the consequences of both choices, but at the end of the day, it's the individual that has to weigh how much that peace of mind, whether the peace of mind is from renting or owning, how much is that worth to them relative to just the numbers. So I think we do a really good job of showing the pros and cons of both decisions and then letting people be empowered in how to or which one to choose. And
it really goes back to that education piece. The more we can educate clients, the more they feel empowered to make that decision on their own. I think, especially historically, maybe people have viewed investments as more complex than real estate and they shy away from something that they don't understand. And that home ownership feels more like a sure bet than something that, anything could happen to it, and don't want to put my money over there because that looks scarier. That's definitely part of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think it's our job as financial advisors to understand, number one, what are your goals? And if your number one, long-term goal is to have a home and to make it exactly how you want and have your kids grow up in this home, then we can absolutely show you how to do that in the most cost-effective way and show you the trade-offs for sure, and just talk through, okay, is this a long-term decision? Then I think if you want to do that, you have the money that you need here. You don't have to extend yourself. So let's take the steps to figure out the best way for you to do that versus saying, hey, these are the numbers, because the numbers do matter, of course, but it's mostly connected to those clients and their individual goals that they have for their future.
Yeah, that definitely hit on something that I've seen a lot that I wasn't thinking about before. So I'm glad you brought it up, Katie, which is, in my experience, there's a big difference between someone in a situation where they're trying to stretch to buy a home because they think they're just supposed to buy a home, and they're looking at a home based on what they can afford and not what they actually want. So what brought it up for me is you saying about that forever home, that ideal home, even if it's not forever home, but it's like the home you want for this phase of your life versus just the home we can afford because we think we're supposed to be buying something. And that's where I think some of these conversations are really helpful. I like that other people are drawing this out. This is not a black and white thing for us. It's more just arming people with all the facts and all the data that's related to it so they can make decisions based on their values. But one I've definitely seen a lot is where someone just really contorting themselves financially, feeling like they should buy something. There's no should in it. Whereas if it's, and we've helped lots of people, we have some great case studies of people, taking out a 60-day rollover on their IRA to get the down payment to close on their dream house. And now we're, 10 years later and they are settled and things worked out and they made it happen. And that's their forever home. And that's a very different mindset and approach from a planning perspective. And in that case, I think we can also just show people the numbers and say, look, if you can make this much over here versus getting in a house now, in 10 years, you're actually closer to getting your dream home than if you bought the house you were stretching for. And then we've had way too many clients, I'm sure all of us could tell stories, that stretched to get that house they didn't really want. And then they're paying for all the maintenance and the headaches. And there's not as much joy in the maintenance and the headaches when it's not a house you even really want. Really hard. Of course, we're there to support it and help make the next decision as well.
Yeah, we've had some situations with clients that have done really well with real estate in areas that have grown, more than even regular, but then over time they're kind of end up being stuck because, the unfortunate side of real estate is that it's not liquid. And so if you want to be giving that to kids or, you want to hold that in your estate and you have some liquid needs that you want to do, you want to retire or you want to do a big trip, then it makes it a little bit tougher because you don't have as much of that flexibility. And of course, we can work through clients with options with that. But I think it sometimes can put you in a corner, as well as clients that maybe have a really low mortgage rate that they got before the crazy increase. And they're actually like, I would actually really love to move. I have a great job opportunity, but I can't because I have this great home and I want to keep this home. So it can kind of put you into a situation there. And so I think just understanding that it reduces your liquidity or reduces your options at times, and just understanding that.
I think we all touched on this and it made it pretty clear, but just the fact that, talking this out with someone can be extremely valuable and helpful because there may be something that you didn't think about, and really think about what's important to you and what you're trying to achieve, the value of having that partner.
I think we've hit on it a ton of different ways, but to summarize that there really are pros and cons, that there's not, homeownership is not a magic wealth generator more than other investments, but it's also not less. It's just different, and it's different for various environments. And there's lots of reasons to own a home, and financial is probably second or third on the list most of the time, if not further down. But getting your arms around the finances can really empower you to go find the home that you really want. So it's worth doing the work.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked this conversation because I think that this is a tough topic to cover because there isn't a purely financially perfect answer. It really depends on the person and their goals and where they are and what interest rate that they can get and how long they're going to be in the home and where they're going to be. So I think it's something that can be really beneficial. Like, Brian, what you said it, and Brooke, it's about having those conversations and, getting outside of what you may be thinking and having somebody just, talk with you, and also maybe go with you and talk to your real estate agent and even see homes that you're thinking about, and just having that partner so that you have somebody to run by the decisions. And we're happy to be that person.